Good evening, everyone. Let's head over into Collectively Rewilding. All right, here we are, and so much has gone on since we've gotten together. Not sure what the new activity is. Oh, it just pops up the event, it looks like. Okay, wonderful. So since we've been here, there have been so many things that have happened. The lady from the Natural Resources Conservation Service, the A, it's not the E as I thought, it's the A. She was here on Friday of last week, and she's not going to be able to directly help us with what we're doing here. She's going to be searching for programs that would apply to what we want to do here at Collectively Rewilding. So now I have to reach out to Robin Sadlier, who I believe handles maybe rural development. And there's also Jennifer Hornberg. I'm not sure if Jennifer Hornberg is still in the same position Robin Sadlier is. I've seen it on the Tooele dashboard when I am working in the other community that we talk about occasionally, Let's Go Help Too. We have a whole bunch of tabs that we work through, and the coordinator tab provides you with some really great pieces right here. And it looks like it's erased where I had it. I did have it on the Tooele dashboard. So then what you do is you just go in, locate the state you're in. This is farmers.gov, working with us, service center locator. I'll share this in Collectively Rewilding so you can access it. And then you want to pick your county, and I'm in Tooele, and go. Now, They used to have a much nicer dashboard. They have been changing everything at the USDA quite heavily. Oh, here we go. Okay, this is the dashboard. I apologize. I was on the wrong tab. So you can do this as well. And the dashboard, all you have to do is change the last two portions of it. So let's refresh it so you can see what's going on, if it's working correctly. They did get the USDA homepage back up and running, but it was 404 error for a good month or so while they're transitioning under the new administration. We'll see if it's going to do anything. And it looks like it's frozen. So these may not be workable right now. They're very useful. And this is how I could have told you exactly where Robin Sadlier is working from, but these are there for all of our regions. And I doubt that it's going to work for any of them currently, while they're probably updating the website to better fit with what they're doing under the new administration. Okay, so when I approach these folks, I will be talking about getting in touch with offices or branches or researchers that are studying alternative methods of different types of daily activities, energy, water, all of these different pieces to start, as we've talked about pretty heavily here, building the structures into the land itself to better retain water. I would like that to be studied so that if it's as successful as I believe it will be, that can get extrapolated beyond just our little area here. It's the kind of thing that the government does all the time in all different industries. And it's something to be aware of if you like to push the forefront of any type of area within agriculture or other areas of our day-to-day kind of world here in America, right? So while it didn't work out the way I had hoped, it is ongoing, and now I have an advocate within the USDA actively looking for programs that might work for us here at Collectively Rewilding. And that's why we talk about constantly just trying and trying again. The programs and initiatives change so often. And now USDA is very interested in what we're doing here. She may join us in collectively rewilding, and she definitely wants to be kept abreast of all of the things that we're putting into place. And she's going to hand us out and around to the people that she interacts with that might have interest in joining us here and perhaps even being content creators. She knows quite a few people who want to share what they're doing and need some avenues to put that into play. So look for some upcoming fun things possibly happening here in our community. And continuing on with the funding search and letting you know how that all goes. Since we were here in class, we have put up quite a bit of material. I'm afraid I'm going to have to factory reboot my computer. I just can't get it to be cleaned up nice enough. It's so glitchy under this internet. All right, so first things first, I want to talk about the sphagnum moss trial. It's going very well. I do not have any complaints about how it's going. However, with the warming season and getting the garage cleaned up so that we can use that to get the shed cleaned up, that's actually the garden shed, so that we can more readily do a lot of these projects that we're going to be working on, continuing on now through fall and hopefully into December. We've already got some steps in motion so that this next winter we are still able to garden in the coldest months, right? And we'll be walking you through all of that the whole time so that you can make those preparatory steps as well. I did want to talk to you last week. Hopefully there's still some options out there. If you all go to the Dollar Tree or the Dollar General or anything like that in your area, this is an excellent time to get really affordable containers and different things. I don't use a ton of the materials that they offer. I pick and choose, right? I don't want to get something that I'm just wasting money, even if it's dollars, but I get containers, I get pads to kneel on in the garden. I have utilized the clippers, like the little pruning shears and some things like that, a spade and a trowel. They're still working, and I've owned them for about 4 years. So you can really get some good deals at the Dollar Tree or Dollar General in your area if they haven't sold out yet. So I encourage you all to go and check that out. But with this all happening, the sphagnum moss trial is kind of a little too much to keep going on as a true actual record keeping of how everything is doing here. So we'll just kind of talk about it, and also that lets me know when I set up future trials, I need to definitely put it on a week-to-week basis, which already these had moved to. But I just simply, when they finally did start needing to get watered, both through spraying and watering the outer media lightly, I was too busy to track it properly for you guys. It's all going very well though. And Vanessa, if you ended up starting a project like this, please let me know. I would love to help you with any problems that you may be having. Also, another thing that we realized during this time that we've been apart, we weren't just compensating for overwatering. We were using the tap water, and I never even thought about it. This book that I've been working on, the Seed Starter Handbook, she cautions against using water from indoor plumbing if you have a salt softener, right? You're adding salt. Apparently, it doesn't harm us at all. It's one of those salts that we can safely ingest, and it doesn't even turn it into like something like seawater, right? Because you don't want to ingest that type of salt water. But whatever type of salt it is that's used for softeners may not harm us, but it does harm our plants. And I think that's what killed my mini rosebush. And also, although these moss have survived, I'm so impressed. I do believe that was a part of what set them back as well. So just some things that may come up in your life. If you use a water softener in your house, you want to use a different source to water your house plants. Any winter gardening that you may be doing, you may want to put a plan into place for that, because you don't want to use hot water or cold water. You want to use towards a room temperature water if you're able. And so that means for me here, I already have water that we drink, I get delivered. That's fine for watering my plants, but it either comes out really hot or really cold. So I need to let it sit on the counter and get to room temperature before I spray or water the moss or any of the other plants that I've already started watering, the rose bush that's in a pot out front. All of these things, I now know that I should have never been using my indoor tap water. And so my children actually take, when the dog's water is almost completely gross empty down there. They take it and they put it in my gardening can. And that way, that little bit of water that we would always just dump in the sink and waste goes into my watering can, gets to room temperature, and actually the little bits of detritus that they leave from their food or the dog or cat hair or anything adds nutrients into your garden. There's nothing bad about that at all. If you have a similar situation, that's something that you can do to save a little bit of money and always have room temperature water available for your houseplant. All right, now let's see what else we should cover. I did add a small bit of additional structuring to the backyard garden. That's these additional berms. They won't have the additional swales, all right? They're just going to be berms so that we can have our sprinkler line, yes, technically buried underground, but not dug down under the ground. It will be in our little hillocks or mounds. The sprinkler lines will be along the base ground with those buried on top of them. So then if we have any problems with our sprinklers, we just have to dig into our hillock to get access to all of those lines. And we don't have to do the initial digging down, which is pretty deep. They typically put in sprinklers, I think, at about 4 to 6 feet. It's pretty low. So when you're doing that up on the top, it also will allow us with the slope of our land, we can put a line at the very far northwest corner that we can just drain the system out, and we don't have to get the back sprinklers blown out the way we do the front sprinklers that are embedded in the ground. So just some fun things to think about, not having to always follow the traditional route. Look at your life, look at what might be easier, more cost efficient, and more conducive to what you're planning. When you do the raising up, you don't even, okay, let me say that again. You not only get that nice, easy access to your sprinkler system, you increase how much ground you have instead of being a flat surface, right? Right here you have your flat surface. When you increase that, you gain about, again, half as much as what you've raised it up, right? That's more growing space for you. With the sunken garden, it's the same way. We're digging down, and that gives us a little bit more room because of the way that the plant roots will interact. We can put them a little bit closer together because they're going to be a foot down. Also with square foot gardening, of course, they're already pretty tightly compacted, but it does increase your overall arable land when you build up and then you dig down. I think that pretty well covers what we've added to the overall garden layout. Another thing that we're going to incorporate and that I've posted in here for you as well, this is something I'm pretty excited about. I love the idea of fruit trees and berry bushes and they have such a weird word for raspberry, and I can't think of what the term is right now, but they're raspberry stands. All of those are more permanent, right? These are 15 perennial vegetables you can plant once and harvest forever. Now, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. For example, they talk about asparagus. If you get a well-established asparagus bed, it'll last from 20, 25, maybe if you really baby it, 30 years, but not forever. Nothing is forever. So 30 years, though, for one-time planting, wow, that's pretty impressive. All right. Now, within this overall article, we're going to put in just about everything here to see how it does. I'm not a super huge fan of all of the vegetables. I don't really like pies in general. And so one of the pretty common plants that's recommended, and if my computer will work along with me because my brain is forgetting it right here, rhubarb. You can do other things beyond just rhubarb pie, but that's one of the most commonly utilized methods of dealing with rhubarb. So we're going to plant it and figure out if we can use it some other way. We were already intending to plant sorrel. I did not realize that it was a perennial. Let's see if it's a perennial in this zone here. So this is not one of the most communicative planting guides on the back. Some of them are very clear. It may not overwinter here because it says 2 weeks before average spring frost or later in mild climates can be seeded in fall, or in cold climates, so in late fall for early spring germination. My guess is that it might not overwinter very well. So I might look for a really protected area that gets good sun but doesn't have as much wind to place this. I was able to overwinter both mint and thyme at the last place that we rented because of the microclimate that I was able to put them in. The overall property would never have fostered them, but I was able to keep it alive in three different very sheltered window embrasures, and they don't normally overwinter here. So you can do things, and that goes along with Hugel Kultur. One of the elements that isn't as talked about in Hugel Kultur is micro or niche environments within your own property. Different parts of your property, if you really start learning what your property is and how it works, if you understand that cold settles and where your weather patterns are, where your sun patterns are, where the sheltered spots from the wind, all of these different things, you can really plan out your garden to take the best advantage and get the most out of it. Maybe making it a little bit warmer for those that don't want to overwinter, or if it's an extremely warm climate, perhaps trying to work in the shadier areas to get a little bit cooler temperature for something that you want that wouldn't naturally be as able to survive in your climate. There are things that you can do. It's really exciting. All right, asparagus. We were already planning that one as well. Really excited about that. I do think I probably would have done rhubarb. They're talking about it as an ornamental decoration, and I hadn't really considered that. So we may wait on the rhubarb until we start working on the planters in our front yard. That's the decision that we'll have to make as we go. I'm also not super excited about it, so that wouldn't surprise me if it's a little bit further down the line. These are completely new to me. Jerusalem artichokes, I have barely in passing heard of them once or twice before, and I didn't ever know anything about them. Also known as a sunchoke. I think I've heard that kind of maybe about the same number of times. It's not a big part of my food vocabulary. A perennial vegetable that produces knobby, edible tumors resembling ginger root. Very interesting. It's sweet and nutty, from soups to salads. So this is going to be a fun one to play with. Horseradish. I have thought about having that in my garden multiple times. This was bringing it back into my awareness. I wasn't thinking to add it at this time. We may or may not put this one in. It will definitely get incorporated into the garden. Lovage. I'm not as familiar with lovage either. And if any of you have any experience with any of these, please feel free to speak up. It's an herb and it has a celery-like flavor. Well, that would be why I don't know anything about it. Stews, salads native to the Mediterranean region. With it being from the Mediterranean region, again, that one might need a little bit of sheltering if you're in a colder location like we are here in Utah. A variety of climates and soil conditions, so you want to find those that are better rated for your area. And that is where the county extension offices are so wonderful in your area. And they also know about funding opportunities upon occasion. So your county extension offices are another excellent resource for you when you're simply just hobby gardening. It's still out there to benefit you and really increase your productivity and success with your gardening efforts. All right, perennial peas. That'll be fun. I wasn't aware of perennial peas. I have some peas, but we weren't probably going to touch on those this year. They do take a lot of room to get to a very large amount. This will be interesting, and we'll put this in eventually. We probably won't put peas in until we're ready to put these perennial peas in. So very fun. Good King Henry, another one I don't think most of us here in America are probably all that familiar with. Its unique flavor and hardiness. Nutritious green, often referred to as the poor man's asparagus. So kind of interesting and fun to try. Also, perennial kale or tree kale. This may be the one thing that I don't know if we try. Kale, we've tried and we've eaten it and we just don't like it. We ate it for a couple of years and we finally just gave up. We didn't acquire a taste. Now, sea kale, on the other hand, really interests me, especially because it is well adapted to withstand harsh conditions, including salty winds and poor soil. We're so close to the Great Lakes that if there's a big storm that picks up a lot of water, it has actually hurled it in this neighborhood and killed several yards down. I'm not sure if they had to put this one back in or if about this yard and those up weren't quite as heavily damaged. Our backyard was completely eradicated. For my purposes, that works out great. I want to put my own stamp onto it, but it's something to be aware of that can happen if there's really bad weather. Salt can come and spray our entire yard. So something a little bit worrisome that we have to be aware of here in our specific area. A perennial leek. Oh my goodness, I love leeks. Definitely, I'm going to try to add this year. Again, Egyptian walking onion. I have some bunching onions. I don't remember if I had any walking onions. This is something that would be fun. I want to know what the walking is, though. Does this need to go in some sort of really well-kept raised bed, or is it going to take over? So that's why we always want to look in a little bit more to these articles. It doesn't necessarily talk about taking steps in different climates for some of these that may not really overwinter very well if you're in 60 on down, right? Malabar spinach. I love spinach as well. We will possibly be trying to find this one today. This year. We already have some spinach that we are going to be planting for certain, but I would love to look into a perennial spinach as well. And so those are all some things that you might consider. This is definitely the time to be thinking about it if you'd like to get these plants and add them into your garden so that you can keep harvesting off them for maybe decades, right? Amazing opportunity. All right. Any questions so far with anything that we've talked about? I know we're covering it a little quickly. There's going to be so much going on that if we don't cover it quickly, we won't be able to touch on all of it. Let's see if Benny has any questions in the chat. Rhubarb is poisonous, especially for pets. That's good to know. Thank you, Anita. I appreciate that. I do think I knew that a portion of the plant, right? It's the stem only that you can use, not the leaf or vice versa. I had forgotten about that though, and that's a really good thing to be putting out. And I do wonder, I already X'd out of it. Let's pull that up again really quickly. I don't think they made any mention of that in the information on rhubarb. Let's just check, shall we? It is invasive if you let it grow out of control, and it does not mention it being poisonous at all. Oh, Benny just came in. Well, it's good to have you here with us, Benny. You'll have to catch the replay for the little bit that we covered. It wasn't a ton, but whew, we are moving quick. There's just so much to go through. All right. We did get a ton of spring cleaning done. The garage is so much more workable. I will be able to put the soil mixes together for both Mel's mix and CR's mix to have a comparison contrast study going on. I'll put the paperwork for that in here as well. If anybody would like to join us in checking out the differences to see what they prefer. I do think, without having gotten to experience what Mel's mix looks like yet, that'll be coming this week, that CR's mix, the sphagnum moss and the rice hulls, they may need a little more substance, perhaps a little bit more than equal parts sphagnum moss, rice hulls, and blended compost. We may want to put a little bit more compost per the mix. And so those are the kinds of things that we'll be checking out and playing with. I also keep forgetting I better get some grow stones ordered, as that's what will be going outside into the areas that I know are going to be permanent, because we're not even going to dig into them now. We're going to leave them as they are. There's no need to go any deeper. They're already sunken down. So they're going to be so much nicer and cooler in the summer, even though they're the sunniest part of our yard, especially if we do a few other things, perhaps even shading them a little bit to the west with some things like corn or something like that, and playing around with those kinds of different options to create a more ideal environment for each little mini section of the garden that we're going to be doing. Okay, let's head into sustainable organic living, as there have been some things going on over there as well. Of course, always so much going on. There's actually so much that I would love to just be posting in here. I could spend all day in here. I just don't get to do that yet. Maybe one of these days. So we did get a shelf for seedlings and for winter growing. So it's going to do double duty. We don't get a lot of sunlight here in the winter. And so those seedlings, had I gotten to start it when I really wanted to, more towards mid-February, the end of February, then there would have been days without sunlight. Now we're moving into the brighter season here in, at least it was during our stay in the Salt Lake Valley. We're here in Tooele Valley, right next door. We'll have to see how that plays out, find out the new light patterns on the property and everything. Although I have a reasonably decent idea already, it will get more fine-tuned, not even just through this season, but through season after season of really getting to experience what that property has, how it reacts to all the different pieces that we add, all of these things, right? So we would give this particular shelving unit a 3.5 rating. We increased it. We got it a lot better. And let's refresh it. The first picture didn't show up. I told you guys I already had some ideas about increasing the stabilization and the ability to support weight well on these very flimsy shelving units that they've put out. This is actually a corrugated plastic that we got, and I can't even remember what the original purpose was. We have used them over and over and over. They're making my laundry room work. They're these amazing, inexpensive, just like a foam signboard that you'd go buy at Walmart or whatever, except it's corrugated plastic. And then they fit in there like it was meant to be. I'm not even sure that we will attach them. They fit so nicely that they don't need a whole lot of improvement in that regard. In putting the topmost piece on, it did rip this relatively flimsy greenhouse covering, but I don't find it much more flimsy than many of the others I've dealt with. They're not super solid things. And they provided some tape that you can barely see, and it's really nice and sturdy, and you can tell it was actually meant to mend this type of material. So that I give it some points for. Pretty nice. Can't wait to have tons of seedlings going on. That should start, actually, I'm really hoping I'm going to find some time tomorrow. Just takes so much time to do all of this, even when you're minimizing down, you know, using the MELS mix or the CRs mix, you don't have to till and all of these things that we've talked about. However, still finding the time in these busy, busy days that we all have, you have to really learn how to manage that time, right? And if anybody needs help with that, I do already have resources put together that can help you start to keep better time management practices and schedule yourselves and all of that. I'd be happy to provide it. Please just let me know if you need anything. Okay, let's see if there's a whole lot more that we have to talk about. Particularly, did talk about plants to prune in March. There's not any on this particular property. Something to be aware of, though, if anybody has the type of trees that were talked about. They weren't those that I was super familiar with. Prune oaks from November through March. I would love to have an oak, and certainly I am familiar with it, but they are huge trees. Pagoda dogwood. I do think they grow those around here, but we do not have any. Honey locust trees. Apples. Our next door neighbor has apples, and their tree probably could use some trimming, but we're not going to complain if some of their apples fall over here on our side, right? Flowering crabapple. My grandmother's old property has a crabapple, so if it needed pruned, this would be the time for that. Mountain ash. We don't have any ash trees. Hawthorn, serviceberry, and cotton Easter. Coton. I'm not sure even how you would pronounce that. Late spring pruning, they don't recommend these because it will bleed. The maples, of course, we're looking forward to tapping our little maple out here. It's not the best syrup producing or sap producing maple, but it does produce limited amounts of sap, and we'll just have to be very nice to it and respect that it doesn't have a lot to give. Butternut. I didn't know there was a butternut tree or bush or whatever. Black walnut, that's interesting. Black walnuts, the main thing I know about those is that they're allelopathic. And if you have a black walnut, it will keep most other plants from being able to grow where its chemicals reach out in the soil and or the air. Ironwood and beech. So those, and it does look like the butternut is a tree because then they're going to go into shrubs here. Alpine currant, arrowwood viburnum, buffalo berry, burning bush. That might be one of the bushes that's on my grandmother's old property as well. Butterfly bush. We would like to put that in. I don't have the seeds for it, and we're not going to worry about it this season, but a butterfly bush would be so fun. A button bush, again, dogwood, honeysuckle, hydrangea. Calm, I would think that was still calm, even though it's a K. St. John's wort, magnolia, northern bush honeysuckle, pea shrub, roses. We don't have any roses that need trimmed this year. Smoke brush, sweet shrub, sumac, and summer blooming spirea. So definitely not anything that we had to worry about, but just in case any of you didn't get a chance to look that over and you have any of those plants on your property that need some sprucing up, this is the time to go about doing that. We did also do some garden maintenance. It was the first opportunity that we really had to take care of some tools that we've reclaimed in various ways. Tools get abandoned at job sites all the time, such as this one that you can see here is completely covered in concrete. It's no surprise this got abandoned at a tool site, but we can still make use of it until it just falls apart. I hate seeing waste, and I will, within reason, you know, I'm not going to do something that will hurt myself or leach yucky stuff, anything like that. You know, there's definitely limits, but I will do a lot of extra little work to repurpose, reduce, reuse, recycle, whatever it is that we can do to minimize the resources that we're using and the amount of time and effort that somebody did put into creating these everyday items that we tend to take for granted in our modern and industrialized world, right? It really wasn't very difficult. Now, this was a light maintenance. Each one of these tools could have seen hours worth of in-depth cleaning. I don't know that we'll ever be able to remove the concrete, but the rust, even though it is so much better, you can see that without being able to look closely, it looks like there's not a ton of rust. There is still rust, but it will take probably 2 to 3 hours of just kind of softly, slowly going over the metal to get that as well as it can be grinded off. We did take off the most damaging elements, so it will be in better shape when we have the time going into the later parts of this coming fall and winter to just sit out in the garage that's now clean enough to allow us to actually do the deep maintenance. However, we extended the life of each of these tools by doing the maintenance that we were able to do in about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at most, I would say. We even ended up oiling down our stool. And I'm not sure if it's the one that came from my grandmother's, the thrift store, or that got left behind at the last apartment. But I will do just about anything to make sure that resources keep getting used, right? So, and it doesn't hurt my pocketbook either. It's a really good way to increase your knowledge and the closeness that you feel with the efforts that you're doing, as well as saving you a ton of money, right? Okay. And it looks like we're pretty well caught up with our featured section here. I have been continuing to tear through the seed book, but again, it is just so much going on in that outer world that I'm fighting myself. Where do I want to spend the most time? And the more I do out there, the more content I can create. However, then I have to find the time to put the content in. So I do think that this class needs to go to a weekly class. I believe I've already updated that. Let me just verify. And today is the 10th, and we come back on the 17th. So yes, this has been made into a weekly class. We're definitely going to have plenty to talk about. The other thing that, and we have plenty of time, I'm so glad, not only the 15 perennial vegetables, but we're also going to be working through an article that I don't believe I've shared with you yet. This is one that you can be keeping an eye out for, and this is Companion Planting Guide. There are tons of these all over, but this is one of the more comprehensive and better set up guides that I've seen. It was through Kellogg Garden, and we've talked about them a little bit before. I really think that this is a good piece, definitely worth practicing and seeing what kind of results that we can get. So we'll get that up there for you as I'm able to incorporate it into the overall plan here in Collectively Rewilding, along with the perennial vegetables. And then I want to remind you all that if you go into the World is Collectively Rewilding and go into your particular state, here we're both a desert state and a mountainous state. We have both of those elements in Utah. So let's just head into the mountainous state as we're in the colder, silly scam. We're in a little bit less deserty, more towards the mountainous portion of Utah here. And you go into your resource guide. You're going to have these wonderful sets of resources that you can look over. And I thought I had put them into every area. I have to think about where I put those. I apologize, you guys. I thought that I knew where I had put them in for everyone. Let me just check in the northeastern state. No, I'll have to find that. Definitely feel free to look around, and I'll have that ready for you next week. But somewhere in here, there is information from Kellogg Garden about what to do in each growing zone throughout the United States. Let me see if that is perhaps in sustainable organic soil regeneration in the garden planning area here. This might be it right here. Yes, okay. So these are all of the different areas, and they have an article for each month. We managed to complete February so far. We've barely managed to complete February. We haven't even gotten into the March article. As we get more and more time established on this property, it won't be as difficult to meet the deadlines that we would like to. We're doing so much, having to, reorganize the garage and then reorganize the shed and actually putting the soil structures in. I'm so excited that we're going to get to do that so early in the season. I've talked to you guys. I did not think that would happen. And I'm just overjoyed and so grateful for the help that I'm going to be receiving. But there's only so much that we'll be able to do the first year. As we're more established, we'll be able to go further and further. And that's part of what I really want to showcase here. A lot of times when we go and we look at something, whether it's on YouTube or it's on an old television channel, I say old because so few people really utilize the mainstream media news platforms. They might even utilize the same news outlets, but a lot of times they don't find them on the television any longer. But no matter what media form you're looking at, many of the times when you're watching someone talk about the things that they're doing, they're so far established that it feels very difficult for you to even approach trying to get to where they are. And I really would like to showcase what you do, start to finish, so that everybody has a better idea of the work that's going to be involved and the options that they have as they're setting up their individual spaces, and to see that you don't have to be perfect. That is not what this is all about for us here in Collectively Rewilding. People that act like they have the solutions to the broken problems in our environment, they're being a little bit, there are some pretty strong words I can say, but let's just say they're being a little bit grandiose, or perhaps a little bit too self-assured, some things like that. We don't know, and we're learning more and more how damaging some of the so-called solutions that have been implemented over the past few decades, such as when we have reforested areas and maybe that forest actually shared commonly with 20 to 30 different trees, and of course the random odd liars to the pattern, but instead of that, you only really see 4 or 5 if you don't really know the forest, if you don't really know the trees that you're looking at, if you're just looking at it in small areas and you're not looking at the entirety of the forest, all these different things. And so they planted 4 or 5 different variations of what tree could be planted in that forest, and now they have completely modified the environment once again. Also, they tried to forest grasslands as a solution to bringing back health to the environment, but it didn't work out because those were grasslands. They weren't forest lands. So when they act like they know it all, just shrug it off and realize that no one knows it all, and we all need to be forgiving of other people's processes because we really don't know what the true solutions are. And if we can ever even moderately go back to what once was, that may not be a true option. We may need to look better at how we can interact with our environment to allow things like some megafauna to exist within our environment, such as they've done in India with their land bridges to allow tigers to cross back and forth because they have such huge ranges, each of these individual tigers. And so when they are mating, they have to be able to get together or they can't. And so these land bridges are one of the reasons that they're seeing some turnaround in India for tiger populations and some of the other things that they're working with, right? There are solutions out there. We just have to be open and not only open to the ideas, but with our eyes wide open, constantly looking through the different options that are out there to find those that speak to our hearts, that feel like they may work to us. Because as I said, no one knows the true answer. And expert one over here is going to tell you they know the way and it's like this. And expert two is going to be exactly the same type of mentality. They know what's best, but it's going to be in complete conflict with expert number one. And both will be credentialed and all of these different things that make people think like they know everything, which no one knows everything. And certainly when we're trying to step back from the damage that we've done to our planet over the past, not quite 250 or 150 years since the Industrial Revolution in the 1900s, that's a relatively recent period. And so nobody is going to know how well things are going to work until they've been implemented. Like some of these studies that I've referenced for you, they failed abysmally, but they touted themselves as the forefront, the cutting edge, and they put it into widespread use without really understanding what they were doing. The USDA has done similar things here in the United States after the Dust Bowl. I can't speak to those as well. I'm newly coming across that literature, but it is, they implemented plans. One of the things that we hear about is the fact that they didn't follow the Native Americans' recommendations of burning prescripted and controlled burns to remove the ground covering that was dry. And that has caused so many of these just uncontrollable thousands and thousands and millions of acres lost in wildfire. And that is one of the big reasons why we have seen so much devastation from wildfires. So we don't know what we're doing, and we really do need to be open to different ideologies. And while I don't like it, we do have to be aware of the cost. And that's one of the things that I want to work with the state of Utah on, is being a red state that can fiscally bring in environmental sustainability. We don't have to be at odds whether we speak red, blue, green, or yellow, or we don't speak any of it at all, or any variation in between. There are solutions that are common sense, logical, that we can work together as communities, and we at the ground level can work together to get through all of the bureaucratic junk. So these are things that we can all start working towards in our communities. And when I'm ready to approach the city or town council here, I'm not sure, I should quit saying that. Let's just look and see if it's Tooele City or town. I think it's a city. Yeah. Okay, so Tooele City. And when we approach the city council, my neighbor Bart, who I keep hoping will end up showing up, but he's been so busy and I've been so busy, we haven't even gotten to get together for our regular board game session each week. So I've got to get figured out how to get him on here. He'd like to maybe be a content creator too. One way or the other, though, he would like to go with me to the city council. We're going to try to implement a park here at the end of our street because it is the end. And then there's an industrial zone that's going to be planned further down, but they're even having trouble finding water for it. So if we can put in a park that utilizes these structures to retain the water so that we don't have to use a lot of the city's water in order to create a recreation area here that would also separate from the industrial area, that would be a fiscally minded, environmentally sound, and community-driven, beneficial area with community gardens and a walkway and all of this beautiful interaction with nature still for all of the children that are here. There's an elementary school right up here that can be a huge part of that, and all those students can learn from that. The junior highs and the high schools can come in certainly and learn from it as well. And that's another great way to get agricultural projects that you have in mind funded. There is so much out there to fund community gardens, especially any that work with children. You can, if you work with 1 or 2 classes just to see how it goes for a season or 2, you have to look at the commitments that you're making to each of these different grant and grant-like opportunities. But there's so much funding out there for community gardens that if you're willing to allow a school to benefit from what you're doing, you can minimize the cost to your pocketbook to accomplish what you want to on your property. So many ways to go about that. Just so much fun. All right, let's see here. Okay. Anita's saying that the stem, the red portion she thinks is the only part that's edible. Definitely do your research, folks, because this is being called from the very back of our memories. And then Ethel has posted for us. Thank you so much, Ethel. The only edible part of the rhubarb plant is the leaf stalk, also known as the petiole. The leaves contain oxalic acid, something very close to that, which can be poisonous. And she's got an article in there for you guys to check out. Wonderful. I will actually grab that as well. That's a wonderful thing to throw up into the community, along with the dashboards that you guys can go and find your local dashboards. And thank goodness I was able to locate the zones for you guys. All right, so that is in your sustainable organic soil regeneration, which is this class. That's where it's hosted from, and it's in the course material. I'll also take that and post it into the feed and send out a notification so that you guys can get that all again if you missed it when we put it up the first time. All right, they're very good guides, month to month, reasonable lists that you can do through the year that will help to keep you on track and also help it not to be ever so overwhelming because you've done it in these nicely broken down stages. All right. So anybody, any questions at all? I'd love to answer anything that anybody is interested in asking. All right, everyone. I think I've pretty well covered what I wanted to cover with you today. I am tearing through several Mother Earth News articles for you. This is one that I'm really working on, small space gardening. And there are already, I don't know, maybe 10 different things that I'm going to break down for you. Several of them are more geared towards the season that we're leaving. So while I'm going to have them ready for us for next season, we're not going to really worry about them now. Although, if you are able to make it to a Dollar Tree or a Dollar General, I do encourage you to look at their planters to see if you're interested in winter gardening, if there are some planters there that you can purchase that are inexpensive so that you can try something that's a little bit non-conventional or less common, and you're not investing a whole lot of money to move into that winter growing season next year. All right, gardens, you got to be thinking about all the seasons all the time. Oh my goodness, it's so exhaustingly wonderful. Thank you all for joining me. I hope that you're able to join us again next week, and that will be at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 p.m. Mountain, 8:30 p.m. Central, and 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, everybody, and have a very, my toolbar is not working. There we go. And have a wonderful evening. It was so nice to work with you all. Thank you, guys. Good night.